My stepmom constantly insulted me and took her kids on their honeymoon without letting me join, so I made sure they'd pay dearly for hurting me.
I, a 22-year-old female, am the legal owner of the house I grew up in, which I inherited from my mother when she passed away last year at the age of 47 from a stroke.
It was sudden, but I've made my peace with it. My parents got divorced when I was 7 years old and had joint custody of me, so I'd spend half the month with my dad and the other half with my mother. I was a lot closer to my mother because she truly understood me. My dad, a 50-year-old male, was always a little too busy for me. I felt like I never had his full attention because it was either work or women for him. I don't think he ever treated me as a priority, but I was okay with it as long as I had my mom. A couple of years back, right after I turned 18 and started college, my dad decided to move to Houston for work, so we started seeing less of each other, only meeting around the holidays. 2 years ago, he brought his girlfriend at the time, Julia, a 38-year-old female, to celebrate Christmas with us. She also brought her 2 daughters, an 18-year-old female and a 16-year-old female, from her previous relationship with her high school boyfriend. They had never been married but had broken up about 7 years before she started seeing my dad. It was quite a surprise for us because my father had never brought any girlfriends to family dinners, but we gave Julia and her kids the warmest welcome we possibly could and did our best to make them feel comfortable. It was an evening well spent, and I'd say we all got along really well at the time. Even after that, whenever I talked to my dad on the phone, Julia would say hi and be really sweet to me. Her kids were shy and introverted, so they mostly kept to themselves, but overall, we had a good relationship. After my mother passed away, I found out she left the house to me. Thankfully, for some reason, my mother had divided all her assets in her will around my 18th birthday because she always liked to think ahead, even in morbid situations like these. Since I had just graduated, I decided to move in and find a job that wouldn't require me to move out anytime soon. I wanted to spend the next couple of years in my childhood home, as it was my place of comfort. My father wasn't pleased with my mom's decision and made sure I knew about it. After he found out about the will, he and Julia had been very sweet and supportive around the time of the funeral, but my dad was a little morose when he realized he wasn't getting the house back. This house was the one my parents had purchased together when they first got married, but my mother took it over during the divorce. It was a fair deal because he got out of paying alimony, even though my mother had given up her career to stay home and raise me so my dad could focus on his job. I believe my mother taking the house in the settlement and letting my dad go without alimony was completely fair. She worked her way up afterward with a little help from her parents and made sure I never felt sidelined or unimportant. She did both jobs well, and I didn't think it was fair for my dad to be annoyed that he didn't get the house back. He didn't talk about it much, but I could sense from his behavior that he wasn't pleased. I didn't care at the time because I was still grieving my mother, and my dad's annoyance at her will was the least of my worries. She'd left all her wedding jewelry to him and all the gifts he'd given her, so that should have been enough for him. He went back to Houston with Julia a few weeks after the funeral, and since then, I've been living on my own here. About 6 months ago, my dad told me he was now engaged to Julia, and he wanted to get married where his home was, so he was coming back here for the weeks leading up to the wedding. Staying in a hotel when there was a house with enough spare rooms just didn't make sense. Their daughters were also homeschooled, so they wouldn't have a problem with schools either. I agreed to let them all move into my house and stay with me before the wedding for a couple of reasons. I was sick of living on my own, and I got along well with Julia, so I didn't think there was anything wrong with letting them live with me. My dad also promised to split all the bills with me while they were living here, which meant I didn't have to worry about overspending. So, they moved in with me about a month ago and have been staying here since then. It was nice having them here, and I felt a lot less lonely than I used to when I was living by myself. I believe I could get used to this. I was even dreading the day they would leave and go back to their normal lives because that would mean I'd have to resume my normal life by myself as well. 2 weeks ago, 3 days before the wedding, my dad sat me down and asked if I'd be willing to let them all move back here permanently. I didn't see that coming at all, but he explained that he'd come back to make me feel more comfortable with the idea of being part of a family and living with them, as he didn't like the idea of me living alone in this house. He planned to ease me into it, and now that he thought I was getting along well, he wanted to know if I'd be willing to make it a permanent arrangement. I wanted to say yes immediately, but his behavior when he learned he wasn't getting the house back threw me off. As much as I would have loved to make it a permanent arrangement, I didn't think it was a good idea so soon, and I didn't want to act on my emotions. I knew this was the only logical solution to my overwhelming feelings of loneliness, but that didn't mean I absolutely had to let them move in with me. It had only been a month since they'd been living here, so as much as I wanted to say yes, I told him I needed some time to think. It was a gut feeling, but I knew for some reason it would be in my best interest to give this some time and not make a rash decision. I kept my personal feelings aside and told him I'd inform him about my decision after the wedding. He looked annoyed but didn't push it. 10 days ago, they finally got married, and we had a total blast at their wedding. They were supposed to stay here for a couple more days after the wedding and then move back, so I was preparing to let them know my decision, which was a yes. But before I could, all of them took off on their honeymoon without even telling me about it. 2 days after their wedding, I woke up to find myself completely on my own, and they'd all left, but a lot of their belongings were still at my house. I decided to make some calls, but nobody responded for quite a while, and I continued to panic about it. I'd planned on telling them my decision that day, but I couldn't even reach them for hours. Finally, around noon, Julia got back to me and informed me very casually that they'd all left for their honeymoon and wouldn't be back for a week. I was stunned because I'd obviously expected them to at least tell me about their plans before just taking off, if not include me. I was offended that they didn't ask me, but I didn't want to be petty, so I started by asking her why nobody had told me about any of this. She gave me a lame excuse, saying they'd forgotten to inform me but told me not to worry because they'd be back soon. I tried to explain that wasn't the point at all, and my problem was that they just left without a word or even a goodbye, which was rude of them. I said I wanted to speak to my dad, but her tone changed, and she said my dad was busy and didn't have time to speak to me. I still tried to keep my cool and told her to let me know whenever he had time so I could get in touch with him directly. I said it politely, but she turned on me, and all of a sudden, she'd gone from this sweet person to a really snarky and mean stepmom. She told me my dad was going to be busy for the next couple of days and asked me not to bother them, even though it wasn't necessary, as I hadn't brought it up. She went on to tell me there was no need for me to act so hysterically just because I'd been left behind and felt the need to remind me that I wasn't a child anymore. My dad had a new family now, so I needed to make my peace with it. By the time they came back home, she wanted me to get over myself and get the house clean for them. I don't know who she thought she was talking to, but she sure as hell wasn't going to talk to me like that. She hung up right after saying that, and my anger was through the roof. I decided not to call my dad after that and thanked the universe for not letting me agree to his suggestion before I'd seen this side of his new wife. There was no way in hell they were living with me anymore. So, I personally packed all their belongings as haphazardly and badly as I could, stuffed them into a couple of cardboard boxes, and left them in the yard for them to find whenever they chose to come back. I didn't care what became of those things because they didn't belong to me, and neither did they belong inside a house that was mine. After that, it was life as usual for me, and I tried not to think about the betrayal I felt because of what my dad had done for no real reason. Yesterday, they finally came back from their honeymoon, and luckily, I was at work when they found all their stuff in the yard. I'd also changed the locks on the door in the meantime, so they couldn't get in either. My dad was extremely pissed off when he contacted me about it. He told me I was being a brat and overreacting because, to them, deserting me at home without notice was not something worth getting mad over, and they did nothing wrong. I just told him to take their boxes and leave, and if I saw them on my property when I came back home, I'd call the police. He cursed at me and then hung up, but I had to get back to work and couldn't waste my time worrying about that. When I got home after work, I noticed they'd taken their things and left, and I thought that was the end of it, but the most annoying part was yet to come. Around midnight, my dad called me up and told me that Julia had something to say to me. She told me she was sorry about the way she spoke to me and that she took it all back. She'd love to have a second shot at making amends with me and didn't want to be on bad terms with me over something so petty. I told her to shut the hell up and leave me alone because I didn't need her fake apologies. I'm not a fool, and I could tell why she suddenly wanted to play happy family now that I wasn't going to let them live with me anymore. If she had any regrets, she wouldn't have waited so long to realize she'd messed up and would have apologized right after the phone call that day or even during her vacation, for that matter. I'm sure my dad isn't sorry either, but when he realized I wasn't going to forgive them, he decided to go all sentimental on me and told me I was being heartless by not allowing them to live with me. He said he was willing to split all the bills with me if I let him move back in, but he wanted to live in this house since it reminded him of my mother. It would be really selfish of me to kick them out like this without thinking of the repercussions because he'd only come back to feel closer to my mother, apparently. He even said Julia had just been in a bad mood that day and didn't mean anything she said, and even her kids missed me, so they wanted me to allow them to come back and have a fresh start here. But I wasn't having any of it. I'd always known my dad had his eye on this house ever since the divorce, and now that I'd seen this side of Julia, I didn't want to risk anything. So, I told them they could go back home because I wasn't changing my mind. Then, out of nowhere, my dad started bawling his eyes out on the phone and accused me of being the most selfish daughter ever because I couldn't even let him live in the house where he'd spent the happiest days of his life, all over a silly little disagreement I'd had with Julia and because they hadn't taken me with them on their honeymoon, which wasn't even the whole reason. He said I was being petty and mean and that my mother would hate this ugly side of mine. Am I the asshole for not letting my dad and his new family move back in with me after his new wife was rude to me and they didn't ask me to accompany them on their honeymoon vacation? I don't think some of you needed to be that rude about it, but I get the point everyone was trying to make for the most part. I stuck to my decision and didn't let my dad move back in because, frankly, he just doesn't deserve it. He's been nothing but awful to me so far, and I don't need any more of that in my life. It was nice while it lasted because both he and Julia were very sweet to me initially, but once I told my dad I still needed time to think, their real colors started to show. They probably ran out of patience and thought they could intimidate me into letting them live with me, but unfortunately, I'm not that weak. I'd rather be lonely than end up spending my time with the wrong people. I shouldn't have let them come here at all because his reaction when he learned the house's ownership had been transferred to me and not him should have been enough for me to realize how materialistic and selfish people can be when it comes down to it. As for Julia, I'm glad she chose to pick a nonsensical fight with me and ended up messing things up for herself on a grand scale because, had she not said that, we would have all been a happy family now, or I guess we could have been. But that will never happen because I'm not falling for their fake behavior again. I was lonely, I missed my mom, and all my grandparents had passed on already, so I needed a family to be my support system, but these people are definitely not up for that job. I'm relieved I realized that before it was too late. It's been a couple of days since they left, but my dad's been calling me regularly and keeps texting me because I'm not answering his calls. He thinks I should at least give them one last chance at fixing things, but they don't deserve it. They blew their one chance, and if I give them another one, I'm sure they'll blow it too, and that will backfire on me more than anyone else. So, it doesn't make sense to take that risk. I feel bad that I'm treating my dad like this, but there's not much I can do in such a situation. You reap what you sow, and in his case, he never bothered to put in much effort with me, so he doesn't get to complain when he realizes I'm not going to make life decisions based around him and his feelings because he never did that for me. Apparently, my dad's not just insistent, he's pretty desperate to move in. Guess why? Because he didn't take a break from his job like he'd claimed. He'd been fired a couple of months ago before his wedding and had been living off his savings so far, which was plenty, but now, after an extravagant wedding and a lavish honeymoon, he'd finally told Julia they couldn't afford to go back and try their luck in Houston because he wouldn't be able to afford rent there. Julia had quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom after she met my dad, so she couldn't help. Now, they needed to find a place here, and my dad had just assumed I'd let them live with me. Julia had no idea about any of this until he told her the truth, which is why she even bothered to apologize. So, I was right about her not having any real regrets about her behavior. She's as fake as it gets, but that's the kind of wife my dad deserves. Anyway, he contacted me today and requested I let them move in for just a couple of days until he's able to find a proper job that pays well enough for him to afford to move out. But I told him I was going to do no such thing. They'd been nasty to me, and I didn't need that kind of negativity around me. He's a grown man, he should have known that if he didn't have a job, he shouldn't have had such an expensive wedding followed by an equally fancy honeymoon. I understand the need to show you're wealthy, but that's only for people who can actually afford it, not for men with a stay-at-home wife and 2 teenage stepdaughters. He was well aware of his responsibilities but chose to ignore them, and that is not my fault. I refuse to feel guilty for putting myself above him. They can sort things out for themselves because none of this is my problem anymore. I texted him back and told him the same things I said here, but I tried to be a little more polite than I was here because I didn't want to come off as someone who was mocking him. But he chose to take it as a mockery of what he was going through and told me I'd have to suffer for what I was doing to him. I don't know what to say to that, so I didn't respond to him because no matter what I say at this point, he's going to find a way to turn it around on me and blame me for it. So, it's better to just not say anything and let him wallow in his misery. It's hardly my problem now. Today marked an unexpected turn in my life as my dad decided to pack up and leave the city, a decision that came with its share of emotional turbulence but no real surprise, given his track record. What stings, though, is that he couldn't slip away quietly. Instead, he and his wife, Julia, chose to make a spectacle of their departure, ensuring I felt the weight of their disapproval one last time. True to their nature, they didn't miss the chance to remind me of what a disappointment I am as a daughter, though they cloaked it in their usual passive-aggressive flair. It's been about 3 weeks since our last conversation, a brief, strained exchange that left neither of us eager to reconnect. I didn't reach out to him afterward, and he didn't bother checking in on me either. Silence had settled between us, a familiar distance that I've grown accustomed to over the years. But today, out of the blue, both he and Julia sent me texts, their words dripping with a strange mix of glee and smugness, announcing that they were delighted to share that Julia's ex-boyfriend had swooped in to sponsor their trip back to their hometown. Not only that, but he was also offering them a place to stay, a grand gesture sparked by his sudden realization that he needed to reconnect with his daughters. Julia has full custody of her 2 girls, and while her ex has been diligent about paying child support, he's always been too preoccupied with his own life to make time for them. From what I've pieced together, he grew tired of waiting for Julia and my dad to get their act together. They've been floundering for a while, their lives a chaotic mess of poor decisions and misplaced priorities. So, in what feels like a moment of clarity, or perhaps guilt, he decided to step in and clean up the wreckage they'd left behind. It's a win for his daughters, I suppose, who deserve a father who shows up, even if it's years late. I didn't get all the details from my dad or Julia, they're not exactly forthcoming with me. But their social media post from a couple of hours ago, a photo of Julia's daughters, captioned with Lucky Charms and a 4-leaf clover sticker, gave me enough clues to connect the dots. I'm no stranger to their patterns, and I'm sharp enough to see the real story behind this sudden epiphany of Julia's ex. His decision to fund their entire move, covering flight tickets for the whole family, reeks of Julia's influence. She has a knack for bending people to her will, a trait I've witnessed up close in the past. Her stubbornness and manipulative tendencies likely played a role in convincing him to foot the bill, though I don't know the exact details of how she pulled it off. Maybe she played on his guilt, or maybe she just wore him down until he caved. Either way, it's not my concern anymore. The truth is, I'm relieved they're leaving. Their departure feels like a weight lifting off my shoulders, a chance to finally close the door on their drama for good. I've spent too long tangled up in their chaos, and now, knowing this might be the last I hear from them, I feel a quiet sense of freedom. I've read stories from others online, people sharing their own struggles with dysfunctional families, and it's put my situation into perspective. Compared to some, I've had it relatively easy. My dad, for all his flaws, cares too much about his reputation to cross certain lines. He knows I wouldn't hesitate to call the authorities if he ever tried to harm me, and I've got enough self-defense training to handle myself if push comes to shove. But with them leaving, I don't even have to think about those possibilities anymore. It's a clean break, and I'm ready to move forward. Despite the relief, there's a small part of me that still feels the sting of loneliness. It creeps in sometimes, especially when I think about the fractured relationship with my dad. But I've learned not to dwell on it. Instead of wallowing, I turn to my friends, who have become my chosen family. They're the ones who lift me up, who remind me that I'm not defined by my father's disappointment or Julia's theatrics. Spending time with them is far healthier than ruminating on a relationship that's been broken for years. It's going to take time to fully heal, but I'm determined to make the most of my life now. I'm in a good place, better than most people my age, if I'm honest. I have a stable job that pays well, a house of my own, thanks to my mom's incredible support, and a circle of friends who genuinely care about me. What more could I ask for? If life throws another curveball my way, I know I can turn to the online communities I've found, like Reddit, where people are always ready to offer advice or just listen. It's comforting to know I've got that safety net. Reflecting on everything, I realize how much I've grown through this mess. My dad's departure isn't just an escape for him and Julia, it's a chance for me to redefine my life on my own terms. I don't need his approval or his presence to feel whole. My mom's support has been a cornerstone, giving me the stability to build a life I'm proud of. My house, my career, my friends, these are the things that ground me, the things that remind me I'm capable of creating my own happiness. The loneliness might linger from time to time, but it's no match for the resilience I've built. I've seen what Julia's capable of, how she can twist situations to her advantage, and I've felt the sting of my dad's judgment. But those things don't define me. I'm not the disappointment they want me to believe I am. I'm someone who's worked hard, who's built a life worth living, and who's surrounded by people who see my worth. As I move forward, I'm focusing on the present, the small joys of a stable routine, the laughter shared with friends, the pride of owning my own space. My dad and Julia can have their fresh start, funded by someone else's guilt or generosity. I don't need to know the full story, and I don't care to. What matters is that I'm free to write my own. The online stories I've read have shown me that family drama is universal, but so is the strength to rise above it. I'm grateful for the perspective, for the reminder that I'm not alone in navigating these challenges. And if I ever feel stuck again, I know where to turn, whether it's to my friends or to the kind strangers online who've been through similar struggles. For now, though, I'm celebrating this moment of closure. Here's to new beginnings, to a life shaped by my own choices, and to the people who make it worth living.